now that I'm involved, I see it as the most precious resource on the globe.
Yeah.
And to play a part in making sure that this area and this community and this state has enough water and has reliable water, I realize how important that is. So that really encourages me and motivates me.
Short on local water supplies and long on regulatory requirements. Do a deep dive with us by listening to the Full Circle podcast to learn how Las Virgenes Municipal Water District and the Triumphal Water and Sanitation District are meeting 21st century water supply challenges for a portion of the Los Angeles and Ventura County regions.
Hello and welcome back to our newest episode of the Full Circle podcast. I'm your host, Ricky Clark, and here we are talking about all things Pure Water Project for the Las Virgenes Triumphal Pure Water Project and the JPA. So today I have a very, very enthusiastic guest. He doesn't necessarily need an introduction, but who would I be to not introduce him? Jay Lewitt is our current LVMWD board president, as well as the JPA chair. Jay joined the LVMWD board, or was elected to the board in 2014, and has served as president now 3 times?
I think 2 terms?
2 terms. So he's our current board president and board chair, and we are so excited to have him on the Full Circle podcast. Pretty much everybody knows Jay, but for those that don't, he is very enthusiastic, which has made him a great leader for the district, not just locally, but now as a Metropolitan Water District representative that we have him as. So Jay is wearing many hats, and we are very lucky to have him on our podcast today. Jay, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me, and thank you for doing these podcasts. They've been a great way to communicate what we're doing here at Las Virgenes to the community.
Yeah, and you've been a proponent of this podcast since before we started doing it. So it's kind of a full circle moment to have you on, and we're happy to have you.
Thank you.
So Jay, let's get right into it. Can you kind of speak a little bit about your background and what got you into water as a concerned citizen? Because you did not come from water as a staff member. You were an elected. So talk about your background.
Yeah, so my background, I grew up in the San Fernando Valley in Tarzana, California.
Oh, nice.
And lived in this area. I was a DWP water customer my whole life.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always loved water. I love drinking water. I love being out and staring. I love being in bodies of water, whether it be a lake or a river or an ocean, a swimming pool. But I really never knew where water came from. I never thought about it, actually, where we got our water.
Yeah.
But I've always loved politics. I majored in political science at USC, and I got out of college. Go Trojans! Except for this year. I got out of college, and I worked on political campaigns, and that was my real love. And so I did that, and for a while, and then went to law school. And knowing I didn't want to be a lawyer, but I went to law school at Pepperdine, again near the water, and graduated from Pepperdine Law School and went into business. And my love for politics was always there. I was a very active proponent with the pro-Israel, a group called AIPAC, and went to Washington, D.C. and lobbied a lot, and had Congress people and senators at my home and other people's homes in the community to talk about pro-Israel issues. And
like door knocking? Did you do door knocking?
Well, we actually had the senators and the Congress people come to our homes.
Oh, okay.
And they would speak about the issues. We'd ask them questions, and
gotcha.
That's how they raised money, and that's how we were able to educate them on issues about Israel and America remaining strong friends. So I was still active in politics, and around 2012, a close friend of mine who worked at the Water District, Jeff Reinhardt,
Oh, yeah.
wanted me to run for the water board. So I said no for a couple of years, and finally his wife, Melissa Reinhardt, who has since passed, was a very, very close friend, and I couldn't say no to her, so I decided to run. I didn't necessarily know I'd ever run for the water board, but I always wanted to run for something.
You wanted to get into politics.
I wanted to run. I love campaigns. I wanted to run.
Yeah.
And I figured I'm 55 years old. I probably won't have that many chances at running, so I might as well run. And I ran my campaign, worked really hard. We had a great campaign team, and it was basically made up of the city leaders who were unhappy with this particular incumbent on the board that was serving. So they encouraged me, but not only encouraged me, once I decided to run, they helped me run my campaign.
Very nice.
And I knocked on 3,000 doors and worked real hard and got elected. And so happy I won, but the next morning, to be honest, woke up and said, now I have to serve. I was kind of, I didn't think it through. And I showed up at the meetings. In the beginning, it was like going to traffic school. I didn't know they were talking acronyms. They were talking about water issues.
Our listeners, I think, know by now how much we love acronyms in the water industry.
Yeah, and so now our water district fines staff for using an acronym.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah. I saw that box in Joe's office.
Right.
Yeah. It's like a swear jar, but instead, if you use an acronym, you have to like add a quarter or a dollar to it.
Right.
And it's so funny.
It's getting pretty full fast.
So I know, right? So I'm curious, and this is a little bit of an aside, but what piques your interest so much about politics specifically, even like outside of water?
It's a great question. It's like some people love sports, some people, and I do love sports, but I just always loved it. Growing up, I remember Bobby Kennedy. Mm-hmm. Just loved his campaign. My mom got us interested in politics, and my brother and I would knock on doors for presidential elections. And
oh, nice.
We'd be very involved and always loved politics. Just loved the art of it, the sport of it, interesting. And the thing that's really great about it is it's so important. I mean, you watch a sporting event, which is entertaining.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's not changing things.
It's children's games.
Politics is a real way of affecting and helping people's lives, which I love that part of it.
100%. And I always say, in water, especially when we talk like workforce development, that no matter what you're into, there's a place for you in the water industry. And so for you, I think in contrast to a lot of the guests that we've had so far, it was politics for you. And you were able to get involved through your love of politics and, look where it's brought you now. Yeah, it's been great. How long have you been a resident of Agora Hills?
So I moved in 1993. So what is that, 31 years?
31 years.
Yeah.
Okay, so you were a resident way before you started serving on the board. Can you kind of speak to the value of water for you, not as an official, just as a person?
I mean, I value water in the sense where I love water,
mm-hmm.
but until I got involved and didn't know anything going on, I didn't appreciate it.
Yeah.
Now that I'm involved, I see it as the most precious resource on the globe.
Yeah.
And to play a part in making sure that this area and this community and this state has enough water and has reliable water, I realize how important that is. So that really encourages me and motivates me.
That's incredible. Literally just in a decade, you went from loving to be in water and loving that you have, convenience of water to now having like a pretty holistic understanding of the industry and everything that goes into it. I mean, a decade seems like a long time, but when you're learning water, that's really no time at all because it's, it's a behemoth. The industry is so much.
Yeah. And learning it in the sense where we had to learn it the hard way where we didn't have enough water. I mean,
sure.
I was spending every one of my days as the president of a water district that didn't have enough water to serve. And it became this issue that everyone took for granted that didn't care about. It became the most important issue in their lives.
Yeah.
And I realized how dependent we are on weather.
Yes.
And how unpredictable weather is.
And it's getting increasingly unpredictable.
It seems so.
Yeah, 100%. So you've served on the LV and the JPA boards for several years now, and you've been intimately involved with the evolution of the Pure Water Project. Can you kind of share your personal thoughts on potable reuse, maybe before we started this journey, and kind of how it's changed since then and where we're at this time?
Yeah, it's a great question because that was the first big issue when I got elected.
Right.
Was what do we have to get out of the creek? What do we do? And
exactly.
we had three options faced to us as a board. One option was build a reservoir in the Santa Monica Mountains. Well, I know enough about the people who live here and love their open space and love the mountains. Probably not going to build a big reservoir in the mountains. That was almost a non-starter, but it was one of our three choices.
Mm-hmm.
The second choice was to put $110 million into our plant, our existing Tapia plant, to meet the EPA regulations. But even after we spent $110 million for no new water, mind you.
And just for clarity, that was $110 million at that time,
correct. Not
adjusted for inflation. So it would have been a lot more today. Yeah.
But the choice was $110 million to upgrade that plant, get no new water. And when we were done, you could not take a bottle of Avion water and pour it in there. It wouldn't meet the standards.
Right.
So that kind of almost is a non-starter.
100%.
And our third option was to take the water that we put in the creek, that we put in the ocean, and bring it back, treat it, and serve it as pure water. And I want to give credit to our stakeholders because what we did was first thing we did was we got all the stakeholders that would be involved with our decision in the room to come up with this together. And we had multiple meetings with the likes of Heal the Bay and the Sierra Club and people from the supervisor's office, the assembly's office, the state senator's office, and a bunch of our environmentalists and people, NGOs, and all the above.
All the movers and shakers.
Yeah. And we all came to the same conclusion. It was the most amazing thing where you get together, and which is really important because if you have opposite sides, you probably end up in a lawsuit.
Yeah.
And that just, spend money and not get anything. So the fact that we had no opposition with this project made it such an easy decision. The one caveat I say is that originally we were posed with $110 million for pure water, which would bring us, which we thought at the time, 15% of our new water versus 110 for no new water.
And throwing away what would essentially be drinking water into the creek.
And so we decided to spend $110 million and get 15%. Fast forward today, we're looking at right now $400 million, but we think it'll be 30% of our water because of all the conservation. So we're still glad we did it, but the board decided at the time was the same amount of water for no new water or 15% of the water.
Yeah, and these are the decisions that you're faced with, right? We had that decision in the creek. Obviously, the board is not going to greenlight spending that kind of money to throw away drinking water, but it really highlights how, we talk about bringing a new source of water to the region and how important that is, but this is also largely a regulatory-driven project, and you pay the price when you are not able to meet those regulatory needs. So, we didn't want to have a kind of a negative look on our recycled water going into the creek. So, of course, we commissioned that study that we've talked about. But it really goes to show kind of what our board members are tasked with in making decisions, because decisions cost money. But the fact that we were able to satisfy that regulatory need while also creating a new supply of water, the Pure Water Project really came along as like the perfect solution. So like you said, it's great. We were able to get a lot of stakeholders involved with that process, but that board decision was probably one of the biggest in the history of the JPA.
Yeah, it's for sure the biggest dollar amount spent by this JPA.
Yeah.
But we learned that we can't be totally dependent on others for water. That we have, this area is one of the only areas in the world that has no water.
Yeah.
We don't have the little rain we get, we don't use.
Right.
Be too expensive to use it, so we wanted to be independent as much as we could, so 30% is a big number.
It's very significant, especially to double it in just a few years because of all that conservation. That's really impressive on behalf of our customers. Can you kind of share what you've heard from residents and community members about the project? Because you live in the community, you're very well known in the community, and you have a lot of friends around here. Kind of what are you hearing when people are talking about it, and has it changed over the years? Can you kind of shed some light about that?
Yeah, most people are not aware of it, but the ones that are, sometimes their visceral reaction is, I'm not drinking it. And I always say it's too bad because it's going to be plumbed right to your home.
Right.
But then when you have a short 30 to 60 second conversation and telling them there's no new water in this world.
Yeah.
That the spaceships drink this water, that the Navy ships drink this water, the cruise ships drink this water, that we have the technology to treat water to standards to drink it. And so it's not anything new. The only new thing is it's coming from your community back to your house.
Exactly.
Almost like farm to table. Yeah. That's the only thing new. But the type of what, once this water is treated, it's the same or better than any other water you're going to have. And when they hear that, they all take a step back and say, yeah, they're fine with it. And been on multiple tours with all different types of people, and not one of them has had an aversion to the concept. And even at the end, we drink it, and they have no problem drinking it. And so it's almost a non-issue.
Yeah. Well, we certainly love to hear that, definitely as outreach professionals as well. It's good to know that people are that open to something like this. And I think that we're also lucky because there are a lot of people in our region that kind of already know about the idea of potable reuse in one way or another, even if it's not, specifically advanced purification or if they're not familiar with the terms. I think that there's a lot of environmental acuity here. People are just connected like that. And so being able to connect with them and have those conversations, and especially because it's such a small community, I think that we're really lucky. And why the Pure Water Project is such a perfect fit for our agency as well. So you've been transitioning lately. I mentioned that Jay has been serving on the LVMWD board as well as the JPA board. He has most recently been elected to the Board of Representatives for the Metropolitan Water District, and Jay is actually replacing Glenn Peterson, who we got to honor today. So Jay has been transitioning, and I know that you have been involved with Metropolitan for a while already, but can you kind of speak to the regional significance of JPA localizing our water supply with the Pure Water Project?
Yeah, so back in June of 2024, the Las Virgenes Board appointed me to the Metropolitan Board. So I've been serving on that board for now 5 months. Mm-hmm. And Metropolitan is in charge of serving water to 19 million people. The service area is the 11th largest economy in the world. And it's a very different experience than Las Virgenes. In one regard is affordability is probably the number one issue at Metropolitan right now.
Sure.
Not even because we're $150 million in debt, but because when we have to serve water to 19 million people, and a lot of them can't afford the water, and we're making decisions on resiliency and infrastructure, which all cost, now the numbers are in B's and not in M's, they're billions, not millions. You know, you have to think about people's budgets and their ability to pay.
Yeah.
And water is not a luxury. Everybody needs to have water. So that issue has been very, very difficult, trying to balance the infrastructure and resiliency versus affordability.
Sure.
And it's something that really haven't had to spend a great deal of time at Las Virgenes, because at Las Virgenes, the people who live here, in my greatest opinion, want reliable, resilient water. And if it has to cost $10 or $20 more a month, they realize the importance of that. Mm-hmm. And they can afford it.
Sure.
I don't believe we have any people who need rate assistance in this service area of 70,000. And so it's become a big issue at Metropolitan. So I think as far as your question about JPA being independent, Metropolitan has to rethink how Metropolitan gives money to JPA to be able to build pure water projects. Not all of it, but some of it,
right,
and helps.
Right.
I think down in the immediate future, Metropolitan has to rethink how much money they can give to member agencies to make them independent, because the more independent the member agencies get, the less water they're going to be buying from Metropolitan, who already has a dedicated infrastructure.
Right. So. That's funny. Dave kind of touched on that when he was on our last episode, talking about how, you know, we got some funding assistance from Metropolitan for the Pure Water Project. And I asked him, you know, how Metropolitan is able to do that, and are they going to continue to be able to do that, since that means that we'll be buying less water from them. And he kind of said the same thing. They're going to have to kind of rethink how they're doling out that money. I think it also fits into this idea of water equity that my boss, Mike, likes to talk about a lot throughout the state. If we are taking less water from the State Water Project, which in addition to 19 million Southern Californians, it also feeds like 750,000 acre feet of farmland. Or I'm sorry, not acre feet, but acres of farmland. So if we're taking less water, that frees it up for other communities that maybe aren't able to implement something like the Pure Water Project. So taking less of the pie and creating more of our water locally, again, just kind of adds to the equity and making sure that communities more in need can have access to that water. So we've kind of touched on costs a little bit, right? You brought up a little bit over $400 million price tag currently on the Pure Water Project. Obviously, large-scale infrastructure projects like this are going to cost money. This is certainly our biggest project in the JPA's history. What would you say to a community member that takes issue with the current price tag?
I mean, most of our community members own their homes. Mm-hmm. And I'm just going to throw a number out there. Let's just say the average home is worth $1 million in our community. And so the argument I always make to them is that if you were to spend even $50 more a month on your water bill, $100 more a month, but that's going to ensure the equity in your $1 million home. That's not only your home, but it's also something you're going to leave to your next generation. That's your most important asset for most people.
Yeah.
So this is not an investment in something that's not important, because if we didn't have reliable, resilient water, your $1 million home might be worth $600,000.
Yeah.
You may lose $400,000 equity in your home. So $100 a month insurance on $400,000 equity in your home, people get it.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
I never get an argument when it comes to that. Now, I think in this community, pure water works perfectly. Other places, Metropolitan right now is looking at an $8 billion pure water project. And I tell you,
for
affordability is the number one issue. With us, it wasn't.
Yeah.
It isn't. But with them, it is.
Yeah, I don't think I've heard anyone kind of put it in that context, the kind of the socioeconomic state of our service area and how that makes the Pure Water Project such a great fit in addition to all of the other reasons we've talked about. Yeah, I mean, I always say, you know, water is invaluable. It's hard to put a price tag on water. Obviously, there are hard costs on everything, but at the end of the day, water is one of those things that, like, as you mentioned, everyone needs. You can't choose to cut back. I mean, you can cut back on your water use, but you can't, like, you know, not take a shower for a month because you can't afford water. Like, you need that water. So when it comes to making sure that we always have a water supply so that we can continue to stay, you know, in this area, you can, you know, put out those numbers of how much in equity you might lose by not having, you know, enough water. But in my mind, we're just not going to be here. You could lose everything. We could all lose everything without water. So again, it really is invaluable. And we've had Dawn on the podcast a couple of times to kind of talk about how we're handling funding and all the hard work our team is doing to make sure that ultimately our customer costs don't go up too much.
Yeah, and you guys do a great job explaining the value of water to the community. They get the value of water, and I think the drought helped us.
Yeah,
because the people that live through it, they get it.
Yes,
they know the importance of the value of water.
Yeah.
And so, but you're right. You know, we're working really hard with the federal government, with the state government. We go to Washington D.C., we go to Sacramento, and the number I always impress upon staff is how much will it cost the average person per month on their water bill? Because you throw around numbers like $400 million, it could scare people.
Right.
I'm going to have to pay $50,000 a month for this.
Right.
But I always want staff to tell me if your water bill is $100, and we have this Pure Water project with all of our grants and all of our low interest loans and all of our WIFI and all the state and federal projects, how much will your $100 bill go? If it goes to $108 and we have a 30% more supply of water,
right,
I'm okay with it.
100%.
So I keep in mind that always find out what the average, but that's what the ratepayers in my mind care about, is
right,
what their monthly bill is going to, how much more is it going to be on their monthly bill.
Yeah, and that's something we wanted to highlight a lot with that episode with Dawn. And it's also good to bring in that your water bill is still going to go up even without the Pure Water Project, right? So I think with the Pure Water Project, it was like $8. I want to say without, it was like $2 less than that. But in return, we get, you know, that 30% supply reliability that's local, and hopefully, you know, it gets us into a position where we're not having to almost go to, you know, no outdoor watering completely. Because we know that the next drought is coming. You know, it might come next year. It might come the year after that. It's going to come.
Yeah.
And I definitely think the timing of the last one was kind of auspicious because we had already started on, you know, this road with the Pure Water Project, the last two technically. But because of how dire the last situation was, we probably know by now we got a good amount of media attention, and we were able to kind of take that attention and put it on the Pure Water Project to show this is what we are doing to plan for the future so that hopefully we are not in the same situation. So definitely a lot of auspicious timing with that. Kind of shifting gears here a little bit, we had Andy Salveson and Adam Zakheis from Corollo on the podcast a few episodes ago, and they were talking about the safety of the advanced purification process and everything that goes into making sure that this technology works, why it works so well, what it does. And that's really a mainstay when it comes to communicating this to people with tours and stuff like that, even our events. What would you say to a customer who's still unsure of the safety of potable reuse that have those concerns?
Well, I would first invite him to come on a tour with your team. And that usually knocks out 99.9%.
Usually.
But also, we're doing something different here. We're putting it in a reservoir.
Yeah.
And so the water is being put in the reservoir that comes with our snowpack water. That's our supply of water. Then that water will be treated. So we'll know before we serve it that it's safe. And you trust us now. You go home now and you bathe in our water, you cook in our water, you drink our water. And, you know, I've lived here a long time. Since 1993, and not once in 31 years have I ever had a boil order or told the water's not safe or don't drink it or there's not enough water. I can't tell you how many times my internet's gone out, right?
Hey, we're not the internet people, though.
Or the power's gone out.
Sure, yeah.
But the water has been so reliable and we're trustworthy. So I think the ones who have trusted us up till now, we just ask to please continue trusting us. And you know, I don't think it's an issue. And there's always people out there that don't trust government or don't trust utilities.
Sure.
You do your best talking to them, but I think it's not our big issue right now is trust, because I think we've earned it.
Yeah, that's a good point. And really when it comes to tours, right, because you come on a lot of those tours, whether it's, other industry folks or electeds or even just community members. And we like to lead with transparency. So if we know that someone has a concern, we'll invite them for a tour. We'll make all relevant or, interested staff available. And even our board members will come along to hear them out. And I think that kind of transparency also has been integral in building trust, because people feel seen, they feel heard. Even if they come, a little agitated or upset about something, I think just the way that we make ourselves available at all levels of the organization, elected, executive staff, engineers, anyone that needs to be there, they're always there. And I think that does a lot. So yeah, always trying to promote tours. We are always giving tours of all of our facilities, really, but for the Pure Water Project, ongoing tours for whoever's interested, that's always encouraged. Okay, so you talked about how you were into politics. You're a business owner in the region, and you got elected to the board, and that was kind of your entry into water. How would you encourage other community members to get more involved, to be stewards of this important resource?
It's a great question, because it's really hard to find people that will get involved. Our board are volunteers. It's hard to find volunteers. Every time there's an election,
right?
Most of our elections, maybe the last 5 years, people have run unopposed, maybe even longer, which is not good.
No, but the board members we have are always very involved and very enthusiastic, and we're grateful for that. But you're right.
Yeah, we're lucky that we have members of our community that are willing to give up the time to do this. Yeah. And they're great stewards of our community, but it's a really tough thing. I try hard to get them involved. I tell them what I'm doing. Sometimes you want to lead by example, and people know I'm involved with water, and I haven't had a ton of people coming up to me and say, how can I get involved? Although we do have a longtime board member and a great board member, Charlie Kasperi, who's finishing his term 24 years. Was it 24 years?
I think so.
Finishing his term next month, this month. And I worked really hard to find somebody who could step in. And I think I found a great person who will be sworn in and starting this month. And Randy Levine, I think, will do a great job. And it really has to spend a lot of time finding people, because they're not knocking on our doors asking where they can volunteer.
Right. And I think that also maybe, I don't know for sure, but it could be a result of how reliable we are, right? You talked about how long you've lived here and how there's never been a boil notice or an issue with water not coming out of your faucet. And I think that convenience and that reliability, people just get so used to it that it never registers in their mind that they need to make an impact on this industry, because it's been working up to this point, right?
Yeah.
Even during the drought.
It's also technical. People run for the school board because they have a kid in the school or they have an issue with the school.
Sure.
Or they'll run for office because they have an issue with some environmental or some issue in their town. And they're animated by it. Yeah. But you're right, because water's been so reliable here for so long, and people really trust and respect us that they figure, why do I need to get involved?
Right.
People get involved when they feel a need, and they maybe haven't felt the need to be involved.
Yeah, so I guess that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. But in the water industry, we always are looking for people to get involved, whether there's intern opportunities or if you're interested in a career in water, or you just want to come to one of our many fun events that we're always having at this point. We are always encouraging people to get involved, ask questions, come on tours. It's a whole world in the water industry, right? It's a world in and of itself, and there's so much to learn and so much to get involved with. But it's been so valuable to have you, Jay, kind of speaking from a resident's perspective and someone that doesn't necessarily work in the industry, but is still just as much of a water nerd as the rest of us. It's been really good having you. And I would be remiss not to say, Jay, there is a saying that you have been made famous by when we're talking about water, potable reuse, and water that used to be something else. And so since this is your thing, I just wanted to kind of shout you out. When you're talking about water that has gone through the water cycle, what was it millions of years ago? What's the water that we're drinking used to be?
You know the answer? You see if I still remember it.
I know you still remember it. I just want to hear it from your mouth on our podcast.
But not only are we, the correct answer is what is dinosaur pee?
There you go.
But I learned recently that's really also resonates with people is that Sacramento is a city in the north that's got our state capital in it.
Yes.
And Sacramento has a wastewater system, as you can imagine, like all cities do.
Yes.
And 10% of that wastewater system goes into the Sacramento River, which is where all of our water comes from.
Exactly.
We buy all of our water from Metropolitan Water District. And so we're already drinking Sacramento wastewater. And when I say that, I think people can relate more than they can to the Dinosaur piece. That might be my new one.
I think so too. Yeah. I like to bring that up on tours too. I actually say both. And anytime I talk about Dinosaur P, I obviously have to shout Jay out because it's true. You know, the water that's on our planet is the water that's been here.
Yeah.
And it just gets cleaned and reused and reused. So that's always a funny little quip that I like to include to, get people comfortable with the idea.
There's no new water.
There's no new water. We're doing what we can with it, and we know that it works. Thank you for coming and joining us, Jay, on this episode of the Full Circle podcast. It's been great chatting with you. And thank you to our listeners and our viewers as always, and we will see you on the next episode. Have a good one.
Thank you, Ricky.